We want to welcome you all for today's Agile HR Community Meetup, Maturing the Agile HR Model with Jelle Jacquet. Is that correct, Jelle?
It's pronounced Jelle Jacquet.
Jelle Jacquet. It is a lovely name. It sounds like you are an artist. You're an Agile HR artist. It sounds like a real artist there. You're working in Orange Belgium, and you've been working with Agile HR for a while. And today we're going to start understanding what that looks like, where you started, what you've learned, and what the next possible steps might look like. So I want to say a warm welcome to Jelle. Would you be able to do a quick introduction to who you are, what you work with, and then we will kick off with the theme, please.
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much for having me, because I think it's always a pleasure to share. It's my preferred way to learn. It's something that we have done internally in our department, and as of the start, we wanted also to kind of look outside, and so it's a moment of pride that we're also able now to start sharing our learnings 1 year down the road of our experimentation. And so, yeah, rather than being an artist, I would say it's more an experimentalist that I feel like. So it's with all humility, obviously, that I just share what we've discovered so far by trial and error, I would add. So maybe briefly, who am I? I'm a historian by training. I'm a mother of 4 after working hours and prior to working hours. So that gets the flexible agile mindset going as soon as I get out of bed. My career has 3 expertise areas. I started as a recruiter and an assessor within HR as of the start. First in a consulting setting, then I moved to internal HR for talent management and mostly talent development. And then I saw that, well, you can push the individual to its limits, but if you don't work on the culture, the structure of a broader organization, that's money down the drain. So then I moved more towards organizational development, change management, doing the people side of change during transformation programs. And that was what my last role over the last year has been about. I was accompanying the internal transformation of our Agile HR department, together with some Agile coaches, both internal coaches and external coaches. So it's a team effort, obviously. And since a week now, I stepped up as the Deputy Chief People Officer at Orange Belgium. So that's
Congratulations for your new learning journey there.
Oh yeah, I'm getting even more than I can eat for the moment. So it's a steep learning curve. Let's hope that it continues that way. And maybe just a quick check on Orange Belgium for those who don't know Orange. Orange is, let's say today, still a French group with very international aspirations and international activities. We're what you can call a convergent operator. As a historian, I would say we started out on mobile, whereas in France we started out on a fixed network, and now it's getting together in a convergent offer with mobile connection, TV, internet for residential clients, B2B offering that is about the Internet of Things, connectivity, mobility. We launched in Belgium the first standalone 5G network in the Antwerp harbor. And as I'm born there, I always mention it with pride that it was our first experimentation with 5G. And obviously we also do wholesale, which means that other partners can access our network and get primary services on that. Our ambition is to grow, to reinforce our market position on both mobile, convergent, to grow in the B2B market, and obviously to continue being internally as flexible and future-proof as possible. And obviously on the latter, that is where our experimentation in HR starts making full sense. Because we want to empower teams, we want them to be able to get out of silos in which they worked in the past and to kind of tackle things more broadly. So I think that That'll do for me and Orange.
Excellent, excellent introduction into who you are and what you work with in Orange Belgium. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. I am sure that we're going to have a fun time, because when we just warmed up a little bit discussing what we could talk about, a half an hour went like this. And now we have the 45 minutes where we can start talking about things. So first of all, talk us through the beginning, because somewhere comes an idea that, hey, Agile might be a good approach to our HR team. What happened when you started? What was happening there? Where did this start?
I think this started in 2019. We were, I think, what you could call a typical HR department with quite some experts that all have a strong commitment to help people perform and thrive in an organization and to support a business in implementing their strategy. That makes the wish list of HR always longer than what your resources can actually provide. So we were struggling. I think we were struggling. We were frustrated about not being able to do it all. So we were putting in long hours, but at the end still struggling with quality or predictability of our deliverables. And so I think even before the word agile came into mind, we had this kind of bottom-up initiative where we had this unexpected delivery where we needed to integrate one of our partners. And it was a huge amount of administrative work that all of a sudden we needed to handle that wasn't foreseen in terms of workload. And so spontaneously, people in the operational roles started kind of gathering and made a proposal to us as a management team, like, okay, this is a thing. We're not able to do it the old-fashioned way. So we come up with something that we think might work. And so there was great pride and purpose in it, because they got the opportunity to work together beyond their expertise area. So people were stretched outside what they would normally do. And they did it just because, well, they didn't want to let their colleagues down, and they were curious of trying something else within HR. And so in the end, that worked out really fine. And people were saying, like, see, we don't need managers to tell us how to get things done. If we reshuffle a bit in our priorities and team up, then more is possible than what we would think of at first sight. So
this is rarely that I hear that it starts from a team or a group of people that realize that we can do this in a different way. Usually it's brought in by somebody who has been woken up to the benefits of Agile. So, but this is remarkable that it started very organically.
I think we were very lucky that a bit prior to that bottom-up initiative, we had, due to a reorganization, IT people joining HR. And so when they saw what was happening, they were the ones putting words on it. Like, okay, this is what IT is doing with business when they go digital and when they do agile ways of working. And so that kind of put a name on what was happening and helped us to say, like, okay, if this has a name and a method behind it, then maybe let's start out. So we decided then to continue experimentation, but also to start exploring a bit of what was happening outside under this agile umbrella.
Very cool. That's when you see actually magic happening, when you bring people together from different backgrounds and they can bring those methods, ideas with them to a new context. And I see that happening here as well. Awesome. So then this team started working this way with Agile. And they had a success with what they were delivering. You were experimenting broader. You were looking into what this meant, if I understood you correctly. So when you realize that this can be used very broadly in HR, can you start elaborating a little bit around your journey? What different paths have you tried? What does the experimentation look like? Sorry, difficult word. What's the evolution that you've seen since then?
Yeah, I think what we said was indeed, we had this first tryout that was a bit more organic, and then we decided to say, if this is a way to do projects, then let's put all our projects together and start with a build squad. We had this tension within the department between what we call run activities, the day-to-day transactional HR, and the build activities, getting new digital solutions in. To kind of solve the friction, we said, well, let's just start with the build part, give them like this pilot setting so they can start experimenting. They then can start gathering resources from different expertise areas within HR. So
Yeah.
that was like the next step that we did, or the first step, to give a bit of experimentation. And in parallel, we started looking into what was being done within the Orange group. So we had different countries like Orange Spain, Orange Moldova, who already had some teams, even in HR, going agile. There was the ING Bank in Belgium that came over for a testimony on how they were doing. There were inspirational sources like your book. So we kind of got a hold of everything that could inspire us. And in parallel, we started doing a trial. And what we saw then was that indeed it clarified contributions. People could really say like, okay, next to these run activities, these are the big chunks of work on which I'm contributing. And so that created kind of, transparency, and I would say more ownership. Like I'm part of this key team, whereas otherwise we would rather have pushbacks, like my run doesn't allow me to contribute to your build project. And now people felt part of a team, part of a delivery. They took an upfront commitment. We kind of allowed them to do checks and balances in their workload. But obviously at the same time, they were pointing on all the friction points. And that's after that second phase of saying, okay, let's do this project-wise. I think a bit like a lot of setups are done in digital tribes between IT and business, when it's a project modus. We said maybe we have to go beyond this setup and think of how to do it for the whole of our HR department and all of our activities, whether it's a run or a build activity.
I love that, how you bring up that kind of learning journey of starting to explore. Quite often companies start, or HR teams start in projects, because that's an easy, it's constrained, it's separate from, all the run activities that you call run activities, operational stuff. You can really kind of focus on project and deliver that in an agile way. But what you can see there is exactly what often happens, is that brings up the tensions or the frictions between the agile way of delivering value, the agile way of planning, the agile way of delivering in sprints or increments, whereas the rest of the organization might still work in a more longer cadence with longer plans, so-called waterfall, where everything is planned up front. And they can't, even if they would like to, they just can't react that quickly to whatever is happening in the agile team. They can't deliver with a 2-week runtime or speed, lead time, something that the agile team is asking for, because they don't have that in their plans. So it's, I think, a very nice story about how this is visible. And one thing which is my recommendation is that don't be afraid of these tensions, because they always will be there. This is just, you will find these tensions when you start working with Agile. They will be popping up in different places in the teams, between teams, in the organization, between functions. You have to acknowledge them and acknowledge that they exist, but don't be afraid of them, because that's when you know that things are developing. What are your thoughts around this kind of, then moving forward from that? So thinking about, you now have started to work with these in a project. Your team is starting to pinpoint where this could be done better, or where the frictions might be. How can we move forward? Because yes, we can do pilots and experimentation, doing something in projects, but then what? What could that look like?
Yeah, I think, and I'm picking up on Michael's question in the chat also, that indeed it kind of, what you say, Agile doesn't solve all the frictions, but it helps them crystallize sooner and address them better. And I think indeed for us, it was redefining what's actually a project, and when it's done, the definition of done shifted. Yeah. And that was thanks to the fact that we put operational people, usually doing the run part, into these project environments where they said, no, your finish line is not at the lounge. Your finish line is when our employees start picking up the phone because they don't get what you communicated, or they have additional questions, and your user adoption is handled by us because we're the contact center, so we get all the questions. And so they started very early on questioning the scope, the definition, and the timeline of a lounge, saying like, But when we launch at that moment, we're not available, or the business is not available. That time of year, we already have a peak because there's, I don't know, a bonus time payout, and people have questions about the amounts, etc., and the date that money will be on their bank account. So we will be busy doing other stuff. And so this kind of made things more fluent. And whereas in the past, we were a bit struggling in terms of resources, just pushing through the deliverable of our part of the business, we kind of saw that the only way to win was indeed to prioritize for the whole of the department, both on the run and on the build part, and then to say, like, if these are our priorities, let's make them our common goals. And so rather than having leads doing internal competition on prioritization and resources, whether it's budget or people, we now have important ceremonies, boot camps, capacity planning, which are joint and which lead to common objectives that are half of, let's say, the stakes that we have for each quarter or semester. And that kind of helped us shift a lot.
What I'm hearing here is an understanding from the leaders and the ones who can set up structures that you need to start working not just with the people, but with the structures as well. What we talk about here is release planning, basically, as well. You can't just develop and develop and develop and push out, even if you're working in an agile way. You can't just push out things that you develop and think that the organization is going to absorb all that with a smiley face and be able to implement or adopt that. And you can just continue with that continuous development in incremental releases. So what we in HR need to do, of course, is coordinate with the people who are going to maintain whatever we build, who are going to hold those operations up and running and understand what's happening there, and understanding what's happening with the people who are receiving. So the organization, the teams, the employees, the managers, whoever is working in our org, because they might have, as you said, very busy times when we shouldn't go in with anything new there. So I think what you're covering here is super important. And when leaders and the people who decide on structures realize that, that's when you can start making large scale influential change, in my opinion. When you started thinking about this kind of common release planning, joint capacity planning, what was the most difficult part in that capacity planning and release planning thing, in your opinion?
I'd say the easy part for people was that they kind of liked to have their workload under control.
Yeah.
They liked the ground rule that we set, that people would follow the work. So rather than having siloed teams with buckets of capability, we kind of put all our team members in one and the same bucket with kind of gig manager on top that would allow them to pick their contributions for the next semester in terms of what is the expertise you can already bring and what's the expertise you want to grow. So those parts are the easy parts. The tough part is that we had no culture in our HR department on capacity management. People were like, "Ooh, I didn't choose to go into consulting," or "I'm not working in the IT department, so why do I need to give a preview on how many hours I will put in?" And so that was kind of the, I would say, the Excel sheet allergies that a lot of HR people have. Go like, do we really need to go there? And we're still struggling to find like the right granularity on that one. How big do these buckets of time?
You can really kill enthusiasm with those Excel sheets. So understanding what level is suitable is, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So I think for us, the appetizing part is that we do this as much as possible bottom up, and that we're kind of allowing now. We went into the nitty-gritty, let's put every hours and things, and it went too far. So now we're back a bit more into t-shirt sizing kind of approaches to keep it kind of light and digestible. And then we would focus on the areas where we say we have single point of failure. We're a small HR department, we're 30 people, and we have like, for some areas of expertise, we just have one.
Yeah.
So we have one legal counselor, we have one comp and ben expert. And so obviously, if they're just overwhelmed by run activities, you can't put them on a huge build at the same time. So these are areas of extra care where we do need to go a bit more into detail and to plan carefully, like exactly when is the window of opportunity that you would be available to contribute.
You're describing it so beautifully. So for those who are new to Agile HR portfolio management, this is what we are talking about here, is when we are matching the prioritized list of everything we need to do with the available capacity. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about the bottleneck capacity, so to say. Sometimes they might be teams that are bottlenecks because they are serving everybody in HR. For example, I'm working now with a big HR transformation where the team of people analytics is this bottleneck team. They're working with creating reports to the business, to the HR leaders, working with specialists in HR to develop their analytics and all of that. So they're serving 5-6 different departments or stakeholders. So, and now we're talking as well in your team, there are certain people with certain deep skills that just, we have one person that can do things. So those are, special care is needed there, not to overwhelm them. So to take good care of their capacity and then start planning around those bottlenecks, so to say. Yeah. Lovely story.
Another, because you asked about what's difficult about it, I think the biggest difficulty is actually prioritizing. So the best feature on that is your backlog. And it's to decide what stays in the backlog. We have this shout about stop starting and start finishing, but it's really difficult because if you take a look at the drive, the energy, the enthusiasm of people in our department, we're all like, oh, that's a great idea, we need to do that. But then you need to question, do we need to do that now? And what's the scope? What's the urgency? And what's the need? So we invited a little concept of our own. It's called the SUN. And SUN is ask about scope, ask about urgency, ask about need. And it's really nice because you see all levels now, whatever demand they will get out those questions for you. Okay,
I love that.
What's the scope? By when would you need it? How urgent is it? Is it really that you need, or can I propose an alternative approach? And only then we get going. So it was a tough one. It doesn't work all the time, but at least we start building the habit.
That's a very important thing to, when I talk about that, it's usually about managing the influx of work. Some of the portfolio management governance models that we're setting up is to actually, what you call the SUN, is that we have some kind of a funnel in, which is funneling out things that are not ready to be prioritized yet. Quite a lot of boomerangs going back to the organization or business HR people in large organizations to say, hey, what's the exact thing that you're needing here? Or what's the exact problem that we're solving here? You're giving us a solution that you want to build this big thing here, but what's the problem that thing is solving? So let's first get to that and understand how we could do that in a different way. Also, what I think is important, I'm not sure how much you're doing this with your SUN framework, is to actually question, what are the must-haves? So they bring you the big package and say, this is what we need. You can actually start taking that into pieces and ask, okay, what are the absolute must-haves that you really need from this? What are the maybe nice-to-haves? So that you can really see that, okay, what if we just build the must-haves immediately and wait with the nice-to-haves maybe half a year later? We could do that. So just having these conversations with the business leaders and with your stakeholders. Any reflections on this one?
It is, we have now done 2 projects where indeed we kind of did a minimal viable product, or where we did a scoping saying we will not go big bang on this launch. We will just take a part of our population for whom we will test drive it, and then take the learnings and do an adjustment, and then do a second rollout. So we're phasing. It does ask a lot, because people they want to show off on their deliverables, so they like it to be all shiny and to have these little additional nice to haves. So it asks a lot of discipline to kind of challenge until you go to the bare essentials. And also in terms of organizational expectation, you need then to say, this is how it is now. We know that it's not perfect yet. We're listening for your feedback. And so it's a very different posture that it takes, because Yeah, it's what they say, you know, you will disappoint your customer first. You will not get it first time right, and you need to get at ease with that. But it's so important. My previous employer was a bank, and we did at a certain time, we revisited the ATMs that customers were using, and they this huge project with 17 new features. And so after the go live, they asked some students to do observations of which features were used the most. And so it was before digitalization and monitoring was done digitally. So they went into the agencies and they kind of started mapping, and they found out that only 2 were used. So
That's it. That's it. I mean, if we go, this is what we try a lot in the training as well, is to go and show your minimum viable product or plan or prototype to a bunch of managers and ask them what is important. What do you need? They might come back with, say, we just need 20% of that. Don't bring all of that to us. We can't, we can't even absorb this. It's too much. It's too detailed. We're not HR professionals. Make it easier, make it lighter, make it simple. That's usually what we hear.
And I don't think we're fully there yet. If I see where are we today, that is, we're more predictable on our deliverables. And so some key stakeholders in the organization are really happy about it. IT, finance, they say you're really doing a good job because it's under control now. You stick within your budget. You do the gating of IT properly. It's much less chaotic. It's much more predictable and under control. So we get a thumbs up there. But if I really listen to the organization and the user experience, then we're still pushing quite a lot and a lot of complicated things into the business. So indeed, the simplicity, getting early on users in your design phase, that's still, I think, where our next frontier is.
Yeah, good that you've discovered that. There's a lot to learn in that specific kind of design thinking, bringing people in, asking for early input rather than believing that we have the answers. What about the prioritization, and can you share how often that is done? Is that quarterly? Is that monthly? How often do you do that?
For the moment, we're doing it at a rhythm of 3 times a year. So quarterly seemed a bit too challenging for us for the moment. Our company objective setting is done on a semester basis, but that seemed then a bit too long. So we went for a bit of a halfway solution. Maybe that's a Belgian thing. We like to compromise a lot. So we're doing now 3 times a year a boot camp with full prioritization, capacity planning, and then obviously at the end of the period, the necessary retrospectives, etc.
This is important because quite many leaders who I talk with are like, oh my goodness, are we going to spend 2 or 3 or 4 full days of planning? And I go like, yes, we are, because then that's an investment in everybody being clear on the priorities during the next quarter or next whatever months we are doing it for. So it's an investment in clarity, in structure, in discipline, in dependencies discussed, where we can really understand our capacity to plan what we can get done. So we also can manage the expectations towards the stakeholders, come back from the planning and say, sorry, we can't fit these 3 items in. Which one of them is most important for you? We can do one. So it's an investment in time. You've done this now for some rounds. Does that start feeling like a natural thing to invest that much time in the planning?
No.
Yeah.
It's always upfront. People are always reluctant, like, oh, really? And it's heavy and it's a lot of time. And if you calculate the number of Mondays that we're putting in, it's even at the level of such and such run or deliverable. And so it's questioned every time over and over again. And once that we've done it, people are happy every time that we did it. But yeah, I think it's a bit like it's a back to school time of the year. I think it's the same thing. It's like up front, my kids always go like, oh, really? Do we have to? And then, well, in the evening, they come back and they're happy that they saw their friends again and that things worked out. So for us, it's still a bit that dynamic, like, poof,
that's the usual thing. Yeah, it's the usual thing. It's heavy. And this is what some people get wrong about Agile, in my opinion, because people think, oh, Agile is just doing something without a plan, or Agile is just doing, changing directions if needed and just reprioritizing whenever. Absolute no. What are your thoughts around this?
The thing is, why are people reluctant to put the time in? It's only when they don't get the payoff afterwards. So if you do the full-fledged exercise, but in the end, you kind of still squeeze the whole of your backlog or the deliverables in it, and you say, yeah, you know what, the workload will be tough, but we'll manage anyway. We always did in the past, even when we didn't do this kind of planning. So let's push it all through, without having that conversation with your business saying like, this is what we can and can't and help us prioritize, then they don't get the payoff. And so people are not stupid. So then they say, well, if I don't get the payoff, I don't make the effort. And so I think that's the part where we need to get disciplined, is to indeed to go in that conversation with your business saying like, okay, this is your wish list, this is my capacity, and now this is what we propose. Can you live with that? If not, we will need to go back to the drawing table and make a joint proposal that can work.
I love that, because this is also bringing in the values of being human-centric, working to capacity and respecting people's lives and work, to understand you've got a certain amount of hours that you can use, and that's it. And what can we do? The best we could do with that is do the most prioritized items and keep operations running in a good way. Let's move a bit forward. So when you kind of saw pilots and experiments is done, you started really kind of appetite was changing and you wanted to make this live. You started with the portfolio management. You start having everybody in one squad, finding people who are working with the build in different projects and going, are they going back to the squad then when they're done with the project? So working with something ongoing?
Yeah, so what we say is you have a home base, which is your, I would say your people, what we call people squads, and your full time will be spread over either contributions to build squads or contributions to run squads, and the sum should make your full-time equivalent. So normally we don't have people sitting on the beach in between sessions, but every time we kind of look for, okay, what's your contribution going to be for the next 4 months? And then we kind of try to make the mapping. And so, yeah, that's how it works, knowing that depending on the squads in which they will contribute, they probably will also be at different levels of agile adoption, because we didn't go for a kind of one size fits all. So I'm coming back on this question on the run activities, for example. We decided for run that they needed a bit more time to figure out which ceremonies made sense, what they would adopt or not. So yeah, we gave everybody the opportunity to say like, okay, let's give this time. You decide the pace of your squads. And obviously you have this kind of spillover effect, because people contributing in one of the front runners, they would say like, oh, I saw this thing, and that might, in this squad where we're not used to that ceremony, for example, it might help us to tackle this or that problem. So we had change agents at all levels in the organization, and that kind of helped, because they were just participating on one squad and then briefing the others saying like, this could help. So they did our selling.
That's lovely. And often you don't have to do selling, because as you said, people are smart. People are smart. If they see something that works somewhere, say that people are smart. Let's start from that. Let's trust people to be smart. If they see a way of working, a method, a practice that would help them do a better job, it's brilliant, because they can take that in. And what you just said there in a sentence that wasn't maybe captured by everybody is that the run squads started using what they felt was important, and they didn't use what they didn't feel did help them. So this is, I think, also a key thing with starting with Agile and bringing Agile alive, is that it's not a recipe. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. That's Agile. If it works for you or improves something, then do it. So lovely that you brought that up. I've got one question more before we kind of move on to the questions, is that, so now going back to where you started with organically a team that brought up that we could do this in a new way. People getting energized and seeing the results of that team working through Agile methodologies, and the leadership team also realizing that you need to start working with the structures. More experimentation, more testing out, going into the squad model, starting with portfolio management, prioritizing items of delivery, matching that with capacity, having conversations about what we can deliver and what not. and starting this incremental, frequent planning cadence. Now, that's a massive change for a function.
Mhm.
And this is taking about 2 years or 1.5 years, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So how do people from outside see this? How can you bring the business, any recommendations or ideas? Because it might look a bit different for a business leader looking in towards HR. What are they doing? How are they working? What's the expectations on us, etc.? Any recommendations there? How can you bring others along with this change?
Yeah, indeed. I think, but that's obvious. It's hindsight. Huh? I think we really decided, even if customer centricity and adding more value and taking that added value as a driver for our change, we kind of decided the first year to say we need to first to take care of ourselves. We were in this constant overwhelm of demand.
Yeah.
People were really tired. We had burnout cases. And so we kind of said, well, first things first, it's our oxygen mask. So yes, we're experimenting, and yes, we hope we will deliver more for the business. And yes, we will hope that at a certain point, our experimentation with Agile will help us as an Agile HR also to put HR at the service of Agile. So all these thoughts were there, but we said first things first. We're going to take the time to get this one figured out before we kind of start selling and promoting it. And I think it's only by now, after 18 months of experimentation and 11 months going all the way with the full department, that we start feeling like, okay, now this is getting enough of a hang and a habit for us to be able to kind of really go all the way with business as a key driver on prioritization, for example, or employees joining product design at the start. So we took our time to mature. Yeah, I think there, for example, COVID was a bit of a handicap. For us, it was a help as a department because people loved doing daily stand-ups to see each other, even if it was online, get transparency on a Kanban board. What is it that we're doing here together? So there it helped, but it was a kind of handicap because you can't do open ceremonies, for example, on the floor and say like, oh, I have some business people popping by, join. So that kind of serendipity in showing what is happening on your floor, that we didn't capture. And so I hope it's something where we can start ramping up now.
Very good.
Our choice was not to communicate too much and to let the deliverables speak for themselves.
That is a very interesting story, because if you would have started with this change, additionally starting to manage the change outwards before it was mature, before you knew yourself what you are delivering, how it changes you as a team, as a function. So you started first with maturing that model yourselves. What I think is kind of key here is as well, you don't even have to brand this as an agile thing. You just start working in new ways. You start talking about incremental planning. You start talking about let's improve how we work. You start changing a little bit the teams. Sometimes you can do this under the hood before transformation starts or before the big company even sees that. If it makes sense for you, you can start working this way and then tell, as you said, you know what, we're working this way. This is why we got this result this quickly, or this is why we could change our direction. Some people came back to us in 2020 when COVID hit and said, because we took your class, we know exactly how to lead us through the COVID crisis. We know exactly how to prioritize. We know exactly how to set that up in a transparent way. We know exactly how people can be self-organized around a central board and go and do what they need to do locally. And that was it's nothing, it's not magic, it's very logical, very common sense when you get to it. So you don't have to call it with these all fancy words about agile, right?
I think it's solid advice. And we always said content-wise, like, let's keep our agile. And we kind of cherry-picked what we thought was useful for us without being dogmatic about it. But still, I feel that as a label, I don't think it's a smartest choice. I think HR should more opt for being customer-centric, added value, strategy driver. I think those things make your business tick. much more.
Exactly.
That's
And
it.
Agile is just a vehicle. It's an approach to deliver value. It's not the end result per se. Awesome. Fantastic conversations so far. Thank you very much. Let's look into some questions that we got into the chat. Sinja is asking, did I get it right that one person can contribute to more than one squad at any given time? For example, split their time 50 for a build squad and 50 to a run squad. Can you just talk around that a little bit more?
Yeah, very good point, Sinja. I think it was our, I would say, most unorthodox decision that we took out of necessity. As I said, if you have this kind of single point of failure people in your department and you're just 30, well, the maths just didn't work. We couldn't make it happen to have them fully dedicated just in one squad and have the other squads managed without that area of expertise represented in their squad. So indeed, we kind of broke that golden rule of being fully dedicated and have this fully dedicated team. And we went for this mixed model where we said to start that people could only contribute in 2. Then we experimented with even up to 3. And then we said, well, this might be a bit too much. So indeed, in terms of time investments, we say a 30% contribution should be probably the smallest amount. We try to go lower, and then you see that it's just in terms of time management, you lose efficiency.
That's a very good point. I tend to say I don't run agile teams without a 50% investment in time from resources or people. So I think that you really need that time investment to make the agile approach sustainable and improving, rather than just a machinery that does something from the backlog. Mm-hmm. So I think the most difficult part of agile on scale is how to let people manage their capacity. And I said, let people manage their capacity, because in the best possible situation, there would be self-management around that. So people know what the priorities are and can self-manage around their time, around a couple of projects, for example, or a couple of teams. Can you share more about how you encourage and celebrated the being, mindset and behaviors of Agile, rather than just the doing, the Scrum and the methodology practices?
Yeah, I love that question. It's indeed key. And I think, you need to kind of mix and to make sure that both kind of inspire each other. You can't do it sequentially. Yeah? You have to tackle them in parallel. So what we did is we had a lot of feet on the floor. So we created, for a department of 30 people, 3 transversal roles. So at the service of this transformation, one that was more on the hard part, the budgeting, the doing agile, the methodology, then one more on the key ceremonies and how to get that going, and then one that was really dedicated to the people and getting them into people following the work, managing your own capacity, building your development plans in functions of where you want to go, but also in function of where those single points of failure are today. And we had 2 external people from our transformation department and an external agile coach. So we really built kind of this supportive environment that could really privilege a coaching approach. Coaching of the squad leads, coaching of the squads. As I said, each squad at their own rhythm, without kind of pushing a lot of concepts or ceremonies, but rather proposing what's in the toolbox and what could help them. The only kind of rhythm that we gave is we had twice a month a 90-minute learning moment where we would then kind of what I call the primer coat of painting and the agile basics, so that everybody could refer to the same basics, but we would put people in the spotlight. She's already using this squad is already testing it. And so it became from training over time, it's evolving now more to practitioners sharing amongst each other. But I think that double approach of structured training with then tailored coaching was a good way to work on mindsets too. And obviously we went from 6 leads to 12 leads. So growing people in terms of leadership obviously is also something that, well, you need to do anyway, whether you're going agile or not. Yeah, there for me it's difficult to put a boundary between where are you just growing leadership and where are you working on being agile. But the team has, again, like we had the Sun created, they now created their own view on the behaviors that are needed. And so they are about trust, recognition, energizing team, empowerment. So we have some key elements that, again, came very much
from the teams. Yeah, awesome. I really like one thing, and I learned one thing here, which I haven't heard before. And I actually think that's something that I want to experiment with myself, that you have kind of deep agile knowledge experts that help you, but they've got a different role in helping you. One is, I talk about the head, the hands, and the heart. That needs to be in when we work with agile. So the head is more the kind of hard part. How do we prioritize? How do we, metrics? How do we set up all that back end governance structures, etc. The hands is more like the scrum master who helps people really get things going, events, facilitates, etc. And the heart is more like the human to human, remembering the values, to remember to bring up the conversations which are more deep, which are more relational, etc. So that's a very interesting approach. I really am curious to see more about that, to be honest. Haven't heard of that before. Interesting.
It sounds now as it was conceived like that. We kind of naturally grew that way. But so thanks for putting the voiceover on and structuring indeed what we lived on a daily basis. Yeah.
How have you grown as a person yourself? What's happened with you as a leader, as an influencer, as a HR professional and change professional?
I think for me, it's mostly about, I've grown on humility and patience, I think. I think very often we still consider a leading role like beating the drum, making the choices, doing the prioritization, managing workload on behalf of people. And I think what I've learned was indeed that sometimes you need to give it time and you really need to say, like, let's trust collective intelligence. And so, yeah, to kind of say, no, I just need now to shut up and listen.
Awesome. What a great learning there. We have one question from Paulina. Let's take that as a last one. What's the biggest win for a company practicing Agile in HR if you just need to choose one thing? That's a difficult question, shooting from the hip, but maybe you have some kind of a biggest win that you could share.
I think for us, the biggest win is that we are finding ways to gain credibility as a transactional HR department to become a credible partner on the transformational work of an organization. And so I would say it's that predictability, credibility, and making room to tackle new roles for HR.
Thank you for that conclusion. We want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for you to take out time in your busy schedule, and fall has been lovely. Thank you for sharing all of these, and thank you for everybody who's been online. We are looking forward to learning more and hearing more, and good luck with your next steps in your transformation in Orange Belgium.
Much for sharing. I also gained insights, especially from the questions, the exchange with the audience. It was a really good experience. So I think for your Thales session, I'll make sure somebody of the team can join as well.
You are so very welcome. I want to thank you, everyone, and have a great, fantastic week. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
Bye all.